Heavenly Father, in our Father, in our Mother, in our children, in our friends, in those we love, we see Thee. Thou art our Father, and our Mother, our children, our friends, and those we love. Thou art with us. It is Thy world. Thou art running this world. We being Thy children are one with Thee. And we have faith in Thee. That Thou wilt run this world. Our families. Our lives. In the right way. Bless us. May we always have this sublime faith of little children. Home, peace. Amen. I hope I haven't forgotten anything. When I get home, I sometimes am advised that I forgot certain things. But anyway, the main thing is that I wish you all a wonderful Christmas, and the greatest thing that I can wish and pray for you all is that you contact more and more the reality within us, Christ, and the one common Father. That's why Jesus said, seek first that. And as the Master said just before he passed away, he said, remember the wonderful times we used to have together? I said, yes, sir. He says, where is it? Where are those things? They're gone. It's a dream, isn't it? I said, yes, sir. But he says, that love which we have had all through it all, from the beginning, he says that is the same. As we began, let us finish. And so, in this Christmas, let us hold this wonderful spirit of Christmas, which is God's love in the hearts of each and every one of us. There's nothing but that. All else passes away, all the beautiful gifts which we give to one another, but the spirit that is given with those gifts, the love, is of God, and let it rest in God. And so, let that be my wish for you all, that more and more you feel God through the channel He has sent, the channel of the beloved Master. That will sustain you. No force in the universe can disrupt that, because that's God Himself. And so let us carry that spirit, not only on this Christmas day, but every day. As the Master said, every day is Christmas for me. He said, all souls are equal. All souls are equal. Someone said, but sir, you're a master. Christmas can be Christmas every day. You're a master. He says, no. All souls are equal. Everyone is a potential Christ. The only difference is I made the effort. And so let us make that effort to make every day just as we feel today, in the security and in the love of God. That should be Christmas every day. It can be done because we are made in the image of God. We have that power. It can be done. We are children of God. Only we have to make the effort. So let us make that effort from now on, never forgetting, thou and I never apart. And when once you establish that Christ consciousness within you, establish the contact with God, His light will be there. It will never leave you. Then you know, thou and I never apart. Thou and I never apart. Now our subject this morning is Christ human or divine? Christ human or divine? Christ human or divine should be Jesus, the Christ, human or divine. Jesus who manifested Christ consciousness human or divine. He was both. He had the human vehicle, we all know that, history records that, but he manifested the Christ consciousness within him almost completely. I say that because the Master said whenever even a liberated soul as he himself was, and Jesus and the other great Christs come on earth, they take on a little of delusion. And so when Jesus was on the cross, he said, Father, why hast thou forsaken me? Just a little delusion was there. But throughout his life, he raised the dead, healed the sick, took care of the blind. Why? Because he manifested the power of God in creation in his body as the Christ consciousness. And when he spoke and said, I say unto you, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not. Meaning, not the words of Jesus the man, but of the Christ consciousness within him. The truths of that consciousness spoken as his words shall not pass away. And so Jesus was both the man and the divine consciousness within him. He also said in another reference in St. John, 14th chapter, the words that I speak unto you, I speak not of myself, but of the Father that dwelleth in me. And so you see, Jesus understood perfectly well that it was the Christ consciousness in him that was speaking these words of truth. It was God the Father in him that was speaking these words of truth. And so Jesus spoke not as the man, but as the divine consciousness within him, the Christ consciousness. Jesus was both human and divine. Now let us take up first the human aspect of Jesus. The human aspect of Jesus manifested itself mostly up to the age of 12, as we can read in the Scriptures. That is, up to the age of 12, Jesus was a boy, grew up, and manifested the human aspects of the bodily vehicle. But at about the age of 12, then the divine aspect of Jesus began to come forth, forged to the front. And we read in Luke, the 2nd chapter, when his folks were hunting for him, he had disappeared, they found him. They found him with the learned men in the temple. We read that in Luke, the 2nd chapter. So this divine consciousness, or this divine aspect of Christ, was coming to the front, even at the age of 12. Up to that time, there is no doubt Jesus acted like any other boy and lived as any other human being. But at the age of 12, then the power of God within him, manifesting through the Christ consciousness, began to assert itself. And we also read in the 2nd chapter of Luke, a little further along, that they found him with the learned men in the temple, and in the 47th verse, and all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. Then he said, I must be about my Father's business. Suddenly he realized that God was in him, manifesting in him, and he had to be about his Father's work, speaking through the Christ consciousness, not as the man Jesus. And so, this time of the forging to the front of the divine consciousness in the different Christs which have lived, and there have been many, this varies. Jesus, about 12 years of age. In the Master, in speaking with him, he told me that as a little boy, he felt the divine urge within him, and he wanted to sit by the banks of the Ganges and just dream about God. But as he said, God had some other ideas. And so he had to carry on and establish this work of self-realization in the short time in which he took to do so, with great personal sacrifice of body and mind, that you and I and all souls would have the opportunity to become that Christ consciousness which is inherent in each and every one of us. And so the time of the coming to the front of the divine aspect in the different souls that have manifested Christ consciousness varies. Larry DeMarcia, you'll recall in reading in the autobiography, received the great illumination, came to the front, the Christ consciousness came to the front when he was about 33. And if you look up in the history of the other saints, you'll find that the time varies, but usually fairly early in life. And so much for the human aspect of Jesus. He was human. He was a natural human being. Otherwise, why would God put someone here which the rest of us could not emulate and follow the example and be as he was? Each one of us is a potential Christ, without question of a doubt. Each one of us can, as Jesus did, manifest that great Christ consciousness and do some good in the world. That's the only lasting thing. Worldly consciousness, with all the things that go with it, money, possessions, and so forth. At the end of life, where is it? Where is it? There's nothing there. But if you just try a little and follow the example of Jesus and the other great Christs, seek first the kingdom of heaven, then when the end of life is reached, everything is there, because you are one with that which produced everything, the consciousness of God in your own body as the Christ consciousness. Each one of us, remember, is a potential Christ. Now going on a little bit further to the divine aspect of Jesus. The divine aspect of Jesus, his manifestation of the Christ consciousness. Now, I think we fully understand that Jesus did not speak his words, as I say unto you, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not. He did not speak that from the ordinary consciousness of his body, not from the human consciousness which was in Jesus. No, he spoke that from the realization of the Christ consciousness within. For he said, I say not of myself, but the Father says who is in me. And so that's the divine aspect which Jesus manifested, and that, of course, is the predominant aspect of Jesus the Christ. Not from his body. His body was just like your body and my body, except he spiritualized it. He lifted his worldly consciousness, his human consciousness, and superseded it with the presence of God within as the Christ consciousness. That's the divine aspect of Jesus, and of course, that's the aspect in which we are vitally interested, because that aspect lasts. The worldly consciousness passed away. We know what happened to Jesus and his bodily vehicle, but that Christ consciousness which Jesus manifested did not pass away. That Christ consciousness, remember, did not come with the advent of the birth of Jesus the Christ. Realize that. The Christ consciousness did not come with the birth of Jesus. That Christ consciousness always was and always will be. That came into time from before time. That Christ consciousness is in you, is in me. We are all potential Christ. Let us not forget that. We have proof of this in the Bible, in one reference which I'd like to give you at this time, Proverbs, the 8th verse, the 22nd chapter. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way before his works of old. Each one of us has the Christ consciousness within us. Before creation. Before creation was, our consciousness was with God. We had that. We also read about this in Ezekiel, where it says, thou didst have the consciousness of the holy mountain. That's the 1,000-rayed lotus. And walked up and down amidst the stones of fire. Those are the centers of the spine, the chakras of the spine. We had that. We had the Christ consciousness. Then something happened. Then in came delusion. Sin, iniquity it is called, is nothing but delusion, attachment to outward consciousness, and we've forgotten that. We've lost that which we had. And remember that Christ consciousness did not come with the birth of Jesus, but always was. That's God the Father. Not born with the birth of Jesus. No. Not born with the birth of anyone. Always was and always will be, and that's in each and every one of us. And so we have that. We all are potential Christ. What happened? As I have said, we lost it. We had the Christ consciousness within us, the realization of it, of the centers of the spine, and of the thousand-rayed lotus called the holy mountain. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God, we find in Ezekiel, and thou didst walk up and down amidst the stones of fire. Those are the spiritual centers of Christ consciousness in each and every one of us, but we lost it when delusion came in upon us. Now, we have to once more regain it and express it as Jesus did. The works I do, he said, ye shall do, and greater works. Certainly. Why? Because each and every one of us is a potential Christ. So we have once more to bring that to the front and achieve within each and every one of us the second coming of Christ, or the Christ consciousness which Jesus manifested so completely, especially as the aspect of God of love and compassion. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. You think that was the body of Jesus speaking? No. That was the presence of God in him as the Christ consciousness speaking. Father, they don't know that it is you and me speaking. Forgive them. So that's the divine aspect of Jesus. And that's the aspect which we must be one with. And we can, because that consciousness did not come into being with the birth of Jesus. It always was and always will be. And we have several references in the Bible to substantiate that. That there have been many Christs, many of people who manifested Christ consciousness. Let us take up one or two, and then we will pass on. We have substantiation in the Vedic scriptures, in the Bhagavad Gita, in our Bible, and other scriptures. I'll take up just those two this morning in a few moments. In the Hindu philosophy, in the Bhagavad Gita, we read about Jadava, the Krishna, King Jadava, an ordinary king, a human being, but he manifested Christ consciousness. So he was called Jadava the Krishna. Krishna means Christ consciousness. And there are many others. In our Bible we have definite references to the fact that Christ consciousness did not come with the birth of Jesus. Before Abraham was, I am. Jesus said in St. John, the 8th chapter. Before Abraham was. Abraham had been dead quite a while. And the people couldn't understand Jesus' words. And he was trying to tell them that the same consciousness which manifested in him as the Christ consciousness was the same that Abraham had and before Abraham. The same one consciousness of God. We also have in Proverbs, I have given you that reference. And we find in the Old Testament Jehovah spoken of. Now, Jehovah of the Old Testament, before Jesus' time, means the Christ consciousness. In the New Testament, we read, the Lord possessed me. And in the Old Testament, too. Lord and Jehovah, or Jehovah and Christ consciousness, are one and the same thing. Another place we find spoken of the angel of the Lord. The angel of the Lord. The Lord is Christ consciousness. The angel means light. And so we can say the light of Christ consciousness. Long before the advent of Jesus. Going on in Daniel, the 7th chapter, the 9th verse. There the one great light of Christ consciousness manifesting as the spiritual vehicle is spoken of as the Ancient of Days. So you see, Christ consciousness is not a new thing. 2,000 years ago always was. And it is spoken of as the Ancient of Days, whose garment was white as snow, and his hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. This refers to the Christ consciousness in the spiritual body, the spiritual vehicle which every one of us has. The throne is the thousand-rayed lotus where the great concentration of spiritual energy in Christ consciousness is found. And interesting, the wheels. The wheels refer to the centers of the spine where the spiritual consciousness resides, because the Sanskrit word chakra, which means spine, and the Sanskrit word wheels of radiating energy are the same. And so here we have in our own Bible a reference to that Christ consciousness which always was and always will be and is found within each and every one of us in the body of light, the body of the light of Christ consciousness within each and every one in these certain definite places, and they can be contacted and merged into. And so the Christ is within each and every one of us. And finally, in Revelation, the first chapter, we have there once more spoken of this Christ consciousness of old, where it is spoken of one like unto the Son of Man. The spiritual body of each one of us, which holds Christ consciousness, or through which Christ consciousness manifests, is like the body of the Son of Man, like unto the body of the Son of Man, with a garment down to his feet, and girt about with a golden girdle. And so there we have that one eternal Christ consciousness. Don't think it's new. And don't think you can't manifest, because Jesus said, the things I do ye shall do, and greater things, because I go unto my Father. Each one of us is a potential Christ, and that's the lesson of Christmas. To remember that the things that Jesus did, we can do. There have been many Christs throughout the scriptures you read. Moses, Abraham, Buddha. Throughout scriptures you'll find there have been many who expressed Christ consciousness. But the lesson we must learn is that each and every one of us is a potential Christ and can manifest Christ consciousness. And so we should try and impress that on our beings in this Christmas day, that the words of Jesus tell us what we can be. We can do the things he did, and greater things. Why? Because God is in each and every one of us, and that Christ consciousness is in each and every one of us. And as the Master said, remember, all souls are equal. Every one of us is a ray of the one infinite Father, and every one of us can manifest his wonderful Christ consciousness. The Master manifested it. Someone said, you're a master, but he said, as I told you, no, I'm the same as you. All souls are equal. I made the effort. And as he wrote his autobiography in Encinitas, in the study there the vision of Christ came, and the Holy Grail came down to him. And the words came, we both drink of the same cup, the cup of Christ consciousness. So remember, each and every one of us, the Master was human too, and he was divine, as Jesus. And each and every one of us has the human aspect, but we also have the divine aspect. And so the key is this. The key to the practical application of this lesson of Christmas is to change your human consciousness, to change the consciousness in your human vehicle, to spiritualize it, to supersede it with the Christ consciousness within. Now, I will not go into the ways and means. You all know them. Those of you who are members of self-realization know the ways and the means. Those of you who are not should be members. so that you can change your human consciousness and spiritualize it. Let it become the Christ consciousness within. Now we have direct words to this effect in the Bible, where we read as follows in Revelation, the 3rd chapter, 21st verse. Listen carefully. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne. The throne of Christ consciousness is in the 1,000-rayed lotus. To those who overcome worldly consciousness, I will grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I am also overcome and sat down with my Father in his throne. And so Jesus was human because he says, as I overcame. As I overcame. Jesus had to overcome. He prayed, Father, lead us not into temptation. Don't you think that he was human? Certainly he was human. But then he said, as I have overcome. If you do likewise, then, as I am set down with my Father in his throne, so shall each and every one of you be set down with your Father in his throne. And so to sum up, Jesus was just like each one of us. He was born, and he had the temptations of the physical body and physical consciousness. But, of course, the Christ consciousness was near the surface in Jesus and bubbled forth. And he overcame and manifested the presence of God as the Christ consciousness. Jesus was both human and divine. And so each and every one of us, although we are human, we have the divinity within us, and that divinity is the presence of God as the Christ consciousness within us. The only thing is, we have to give the effort, make the effort, overcome, supersede worldly consciousness, spiritualize this worldly consciousness into what it really is, the presence of God in us as the Christ consciousness. And so, in conclusion, one verse from the Bible, in St. John, the 8th chapter, 28th verse. This is the key to the lesson of Christmas. When Jesus said, Then said Jesus unto them, When ye have lifted up the Son of Man, then shall ye know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself, but as my Father hath taught me, so I speak these things. And so each and every one of us, when we have lifted up this Son of Man, this worldly consciousness, then we, being potential Christ, shall realize that we are one with the infinite Father. And then we can say and know, Thou and I, O Father, Thou and I, in me as the Christ consciousness, never apart, never apart. God in me, my Father, He and I are one. Let us just sit for just a moment, not come down quickly from the presence of God which is here with us. We soon will come down, too soon. But let us hold it for a few moments. Merge in that great presence of God. No birth, no death, no guest have I. No birth, no death, no guest have I. Father, mother, have I none. Father, mother, have I none. I am He, I am He. Blessed Spirit, I am He. I am He, I am He. Blessed Spirit, I am He. No birth, no death, no cast have I. No birth, no death, no cast have I. Sky nor earth, nor metals have I. Sky nor earth, nor metals have I. I am He, I am He. Christ's light is with me. I am He, I am He. Christ's light is with me. I am He, I am He. Christ's light is with me. I am He, I am He. Christ's light is with me. Beloved Father, we are blessed by Thy holy presence. Keep us ever such. Thy humble children. Om.